Hey, this is Doc Yates. I'm a naturopathic doctor, registered acupuncturist, and a kinesiologist, owner of the Yates Naturopathic Clinic, and the founder of the interactive health website, Able Health. And this is the Simply Health Podcast, a show for females where I work to simplify and demystify the secrets of achieving optimal health naturally, based on my own experience in working with thousands of female patients over the past 15 years of my clinical practice. Welcome to Simply Health. Hey, this is Doc Yates, and today we're going to talk about perimenopause and weight loss, and more specifically, the effects of the hormone changes that you see around perimenopause and how that affects your body's ability to lose weight and how it often can make you gain weight if you're not dealing with it properly. So typically, unfortunately, what happens for a lot of people when they see their clinician about this, there's usually one of three things that will happen. They'll either say, kind of accept it, it's part of life. Sometimes they'll just give you antidepressants to kind of work with like an off-label prescription to see if they can get a side effect from it to help with some of your symptoms. Or they will often give you synthetic hormones or horse hormones, which, if not used in balance, can often make the problems worse. So that's not typically the ideal way to go, so I was hoping to share a little bit of my experience today, and then hopefully this can help some people out. So to start with, I would say for the first few years of clinic, we were not prescribing bioidentical hormones yet at that point. So I did a lot of work with patients and going through perimenopause using purely natural remedies, a lot of herbal formulas, acupuncture, diet changes, and it gave me a really good idea in terms of how far you could get with just using natural treatments, especially for dealing with from the symptom standpoint. Definitely when the hormones start dropping in perimenopause and menopause, treating just with natural remedies, herbal formulas, and without the use of bioidentical hormones, you are not going to reestablish hormone balance, but you can get a good effect working with symptoms. For example, like hot flashes, night sweats. I developed a formula specifically for that actually has very good results for hot flashes, night sweats, and I called it Hot Flash Results. And it worked great, but for some of the other effects that you will see with perimenopausal hormone changes, the best effect by far is bioidentical hormones used in the proper dose. So I want to discuss a few factors that are important for this, and we're going to start with the term estrogen dominance. So estrogen dominance is something that is a lot more applicable to perimenopause as opposed to menopause. So menopause is when you have fully stopped your period, generally for at least a year, and at that point you're supposed to be considered to be in menopause. That being said, sometimes you will see cases where the period can just randomly come back for a short period of time, but that would be menopause. Perimenopause is the time leading up to that, where your hormones are starting to shift, but yet you still have a regular cycle. So in this case, estrogen dominance is when you have too much estrogen relative to progesterone. So even though they're not in the exact same amount, you want to think of them in the same ratio. Depending on the amount of estrogen you have, therefore you should have a certain amount of progesterone, and they work together. What happens in perimenopause is that progesterone levels start dropping. And really, progesterone levels start dropping by about age 30. They slowly start working their way down, which is why they become such an important component of fertility treatments for a lot of couples in their 30s. So again, it's not necessary. It doesn't always mean that you have too much estrogen, though often that is the case. Sometimes it's that you don't have enough progesterone relative to estrogen. And as I mentioned before, the most common thing is the lowered progesterone, because that is something that just starts dipping once you're in your 30s and going on. The elevated estrogen can also happen and accompany that. So sometimes you can have both, where the progesterone's dropping and the estrogen levels have gone up. And there's a few different factors that people use to kind of help explain this. One, there's almost like a negative feedback, such that if you increase your estrogen, depending on the type of estrogens, it could increase your body weight. But then as you increase your fat, because fat can actually have an effect on your estrogen levels, then your estrogen gets even higher. So more estrogen, more fat, more fat, more estrogen, and it just keeps going and cycling in that direction, especially when you don't have the progesterone to balance it all out. What should be happening when you are in perimenopause is that as the ovaries reduce their ability to make the female hormones, the female sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, is that the adrenal glands, the ones that you probably heard of, adrenal glands are typically, people think about adrenaline when someone's under a lot of stress, or cortisol is another one that people are aware of. Those are produced in the adrenal glands. And what should happen is that as the ovaries start to reduce their function, the adrenal glands will do some work to pick up, and though they'll never produce as much, but they are supposed to produce some of the female hormones to kind of help the body adapt through that stage. I remember, it just rarely happens, that's all. I remember being at a conference, and I can't remember the name of the speaker, Dr. Pam, and she had mentioned that was all her focus was bioidentical hormones, and she'd been working with hormones for a long time. And she said the only time that she's ever found some females where their hormones were maintaining in perimenopause and postmenopause where it was clear that they never really had any stress. She basically said she had some clients that were extremely wealthy women that never had any financial stress. They had a great relationship with her husband through all their years, so they never had any marital stress. They never had work stress. And at that point, the adrenal glands had never really been stressed, so that they had the ability still to pick up and take off when the ovaries started to lose their function. So that, unfortunately, seems to be extremely rare, and rare enough that I haven't seen it in my own practice as of yet. Though, apparently it can happen if you are in one of those situations, and if you are, I'm very happy for you. The next thing that you want to consider, and this is very interesting when it comes to hormone levels and your ability to lose weight, is that people always think that just estrogen alone makes you gain weight, and that's not entirely true. Estrogen acts on, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but estrogen can act on two different types of estrogen receptors, A and B. And depending on the hormone balance of, for instance, cortisol or progesterone in your body, it can have an effect in terms of what receptor your estrogen is acting on. So, for instance, receptor A will make you gain more weight around your belly, whereas receptor B will reduce your body fat gain around your belly, but it gives you more of the fat in more of like the female shape, so around your hips, buttocks, but it will actually help you lose weight and help your metabolism. So how is it then that estrogen can make you gain weight and lose weight at the same time? Like I said, it all depends on which receptor it's acting on. You want to think of the receptors like a lock on a door, and estrogen is the key, and depending on how many things you're unlocking of receptor A for that door versus B will determine what's going to happen with your body from this estrogen. So if your progesterone levels are all balanced, you're much more ability to act on receptor B, which is great because you'll have reduced body fat, and it also has a lot of protective effects. Interestingly enough, it has an effect to protect against certain cancers and excuse me, if I could speak, that would be great, to protect against heart disease as well. So estrogen, that people often think can be increasing cancer, and that's always one of the big concerns, it's only if it's out of balance, and apparently the more it's out of balance with progesterone, this can play a role. Not to go on a sidetrack, but when they did the big female hormone study and they showed that there was a slight increase in cancer, there's a few factors that are very different than the way that they were doing things versus the way they do hormonal treatments now, at least for people who are versed in bioidentical hormones. So during those studies, they were giving really high doses of estrogen. They were not using any progesterone at all. They were giving it orally and not topically, and all the estrogen they were giving was either synthetic or horse hormones. And what they have if you think about that in terms of these receptors, if the progesterone levels are dropped, so estrogen is acting more on receptor A versus B, you're getting the weight gain, you're getting any of these possible increased risks because it's not balanced, and you're using they were using a very, very high dose. Like, they were using high enough doses that they were trying to put these menopausal females to have higher hormones than a pregnant woman in her early 20s. So they weren't measuring, they were just blasting everybody with these high doses of estrogen, no progesterone, and again, not the same as the body's hormones, all these synthetic hormones. So that can play a huge role in your body's ability to lose weight, and it will make you, like I said, it will definitely contribute to your weight gain. But really all that comes down to is that don't use estrogen, don't take estrogen orally, that came out wrong. Don't take estrogen without progesterone, and don't take it orally. Now, you can use progesterone without estrogen because, as I mentioned before, progesterone will be dropping first, so your body still has the estrogen level. So again, it's all about this balance. And as long as you're achieving that balance, I've never seen a case where estrogen has dropped before progesterone. I just have not seen that yet in all my practice since 2008. So it's for perimenopause, it's very common to prescribe progesterone without estrogen, but never the other way around. Okay, so the other, like I said, as I mentioned before, a lot of people's concerns are that they don't want to use any bioidentical hormones because they are worried that they could cause cancer. And as I mentioned before, when they're used in balance, and you can have effect on those different receptors by balancing progesterone, based on the studies, it would reduce your risk for those cancers, which is, I would feel, to be a more of an incentive to use it. And a lot of times when it comes to people worried about hormones, I feel like a lot of people are just too quick to accept their fate. They're like, well, this is what happened to my mom when she got older, and this is what happened to my aunts when she got older, so therefore I am just destined and doomed to gain a lot of weight around my midsection and have all these other cardiovascular issues and everything that comes along with it, and brain fog, and never sleep well again. And that does not have to be your fate. Just if you can work with a provider who's well versed in bioidentical hormones, they can check your levels, they can determine what hormones you need in what doses, and then work with you to maintain the balance of those levels. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. But I hope this was informative, a little bit of a ramble, but I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. This is Doc Yates signing off. Thanks for tuning in to Simply Health. If you want to learn more about health, check out Able Health. If you want to see some of the other projects that I've been working on in health, business, music, and life, please check out the links below.